This individual oral focuses on the concepts of loneliness and isolation. Loneliness and isolation are growing threats to our population. With the increase of handheld devices in recent history, we are less connected physically to each other and more connected digitally. It allows us to order groceries online without ever having to actually get off the couch and interact with anyone. This idea of isolation is going to continue to spread and grow with the impact of COVID, the fact that we are forced to socially distance, and the fact that we are more and more isolated every day. We're seeing less people. We're spending more and more time alone. And so the impacts of this are pretty great. People are losing their jobs. Their social structures are starting to break down. And it has an impact on the human too. It's not good for us to feel lonely and isolated. It suppresses the immune system. It increases your risk of disease. It also just essentially makes your body feel like it's under attack. And its studies show that people who are lonely tend to make unhealthy decisions about sort of trying to heal that pain and go through it. So it's undeniable that loneliness and isolation is a major risk to our society today. It's also undeniable that it has a major impact on the future of the humans that inhabit this space. What I find interesting is that there's nobody out there really talking about how to move through the pain and suffering of loneliness and isolation. And this is a global issue that impacts people all over the world in so many facets. But this oral will particularly explore how two authors suggest what it feels like to go through this pain, but also how you might be able to sort of move through it. So the themes of loneliness and isolation are addressed in the text Hear the Wind Sing by Haruki Murakami and in the song Lovely by Billie Eilish. Eilish addresses the issue of loneliness through space and personification, whereas Murakami employs indirect metaphor and the concept of light to treat the issue. While both authors offer slightly different techniques to address the issue, they both offer a way to deal with the pain of being alone. And that's something I think our world needs a bit more of. So to begin with, Hear the Wind Sing, the 40-line set I have chosen, focuses in on this moment where the narrator, who has always had an interest in this girl, he calls her the four-fingered girl because she has four fingers, but they're sitting in a shipyard together and they're finally having an intimate moment that he's been longing for and that she's been sort of distant about. And they're looking out onto this shipyard. There's docks, there's boats. And he says, they're looking out on the ocean. And immediately in this moment, I imagine, what it's like to look out on the ocean. If you ever have, you know that it is awe-inspiring. It's gorgeous. It makes you feel something that sort of is unexplainable. And it reminds me of this Japanese aesthetic called Yugen. And a lot of Japanese authors employ this aesthetic. And I think Murakami is doing this here, where he's using this moment of awe and wonder, this moment of Yugen, for her to be able to be a bit more vulnerable. When we're in these moments of awe, we see beauty and we want to be beautiful ourselves. We're like more willing to give out some information and give ourselves some focus. And so when she's talking to him about her pain, she says to him, you're the first person I've told. And if you have gone through what this girl has explained to him, she hears voices in her head. She's had a really traumatic past. And this is the first person that she's ever told. So that's a lot of weight to bear, right? And when we don't tell people things, it's because we are ashamed of those things. And when we're ashamed, we isolate ourselves. So we're afraid to tell anybody. So we feel like we're the only ones going through it. And this creates this idea of silence. So you don't actually ever talk about it or get help. You just are sort of stuck in this feeling. But in this moment, she can be vulnerable because there's this ocean in front of her and it's incredible. And this person next to her is sort of shining a bit of some positive energy on her as well. Comparingly, we can see the same theme of loneliness in Eilish's song, Lovely. Eilish is known for her honest portrayal of pain. She's a young pop star who's essentially grown up in the eyes of the world. And she's known for writing about what it's really like to grow up in this place. Initially, in the beginning of the song, she treats loneliness as it's something that she's trying to get out of. She says specifically, I'm looking for a better place. When you're looking for a better place than where you are, this insinuates the fact that anywhere is better than where you are, just a better place. It doesn't have to be the best. It doesn't have to be my favorite, just a better place. And so this evokes this feeling of being trapped, right? She's in survival mode. She's trapped in a place that she doesn't want to be. Later in the song, she sort of switches to this idea of being lovely, which we'll get to. And I don't think this is a feigned idea. I think that she truly is being genuine here. I don't think she's just like being like, oh, isn't it lovely, being sarcastic. I think she's truly saying that it is lovely, and you have to find the loveliness in it in order to make it through. Both texts illustrate the struggle as something that is like believed to be inescapable. You're trapped. It's this place. In Murakami's text, he uses an indirect metaphor to describe what it's like to be in this place. So he describes the ships in the shipyard, and he talks to them as being caked with barnacles. Barnacles are these hard crustaceans that form on the outsides of boats from the roughness and chaotic nature of the ocean. And this is interesting because as the narrator is talking to the four-fingered girl, she's sharing her pain, and she explains that she has voices in her head and that there's these rough, violent voices. And what I see here is this comparison between the caked barnacles on the ship, which are basically wounds of the sea, like they're scabs from the sea. And she has these rough, violent voices, which are a version of wounds or scabs that we all have from her difficult life. So essentially, she's like the ship, right? She's out there all alone and having all of this emotional, physical, mental trauma from the past. And she feels stuck. She feels like she has nobody to talk to. Nobody will understand. On the other hand, Eilish employs the motif of space to address what it's like to go through loneliness. And so she uses a lot of words that focus on space and location. Words like home, here, hide, where. And she makes it feel like being lonely is a place that you are in, which again creates this feeling of isolation. Because if you're in a place and no one else is there, then you are alone. And that is a difficult feeling. But she begins the song by sort of describing it as something that she needs to hide from. And we'll get to that here shortly. But this moment experience highlights this idea of being stuck. Eventually, she tries to suggest that you might make a home of the pain. She like concedes to this place that she's stuck in, and she's like, it's fine. I'll make a home of it. I'll make it work. Murakami uses a motif as well, but rather he uses it to suggest a way through the pain, right? So they've both talked about what it's like to be there, trapped, and now they express maybe how they might make it through by what their characters experience. And so Murakami uses a lot of references to light. When we think about light, we think about things that are good, that are vibrant, that often are holy. And when we illuminate something, when we turn on a light or we shine a light on something, we're doing it because we want to see it better. We want it to be seen. And so by referencing light so much, I think he's trying to create some light in this moment for those characters. It creates this sense of buoyancy. He moves on to describe that the stars were twinkling above them. And again, this concept of stars is interesting to even mention it. They're in this moment of awe of Yugen, and the stars are twinkling. And stars traditionally, or really in ancient cultures, represent direction and hope. And so the stars are twinkling down on these boats, but they're covered with barnacles. And they're shining a light on something that is seen as wounded and possibly dirty and possibly old and maybe a bit broken. And so in this moment, we can sort of see that he's suggesting possibly that you got to shine a light on the ugly things, on the broken things, in order to make it through them, right? In order to process them. And I think in a lot of ways, when he's sitting here in this moment of Yugen with this character, with the four-fingered girl, he's allowing her to be vulnerable. So he's almost like her light. The stars are the boat's light, and he is her light. And by shining a light on her, by giving her attention and time and asking questions, she's able to make her way through her pain a little bit. While Murakami suggests shining a light on it, Isla suggests sort of a different way of dealing with it by becoming acquainted with it. She does this by personifying the mind. She treats it as something that you should fear. And she says, I need a place to hide. When we want to hide from something, it means it's out to get us. It's, we gotta save ourselves, protect ourselves, and hide. Again, this feeling of isolation and specifically entrapment. If you're hiding, you can't go just anywhere. You have to stay hiding. She further describes loneliness as something that tear me to pieces, skin to bone. This is a very interesting piece of imagery, right? Because it's very animalistic. I'm imagining a tiger or a bear just ripping apart someone's skin down to the bone. And there's really no escaping that. If a bear or tiger attacks you, you're probably pretty much done. And so she feels trapped, right? She's like in this mind trap. But she then sort of accepts it. And she decides to make it a home. She says, isn't this lovely? And she keeps repeating that, because if you make something a home, then you acquaint yourself with it. You become comfortable with it. You make it work for you. And that's essentially what she's trying to do. And so ultimately, both authors reveal the struggle of isolation and loneliness, and they present the sort of trapped mentality of the victim. But they both have unique perspectives on possibly how to move through that traumatic space. Isla suggests that loneliness should be made lovely. Like when you're in this ugly place, try your best to make it lovely in order to make it through. And Murakami suggests that you need to be illuminated. Like you need to shine a light on your ugly parts. And you need to let other people shine a light on you in order to make it through.